Welcome to our first Stop and Jot for Module 3. Grab your handout for a quick review. We started our discussion with a look at the big picture of assessment, all the general terms and big concepts about assessment that we learned in college, but may not have really thought much about since then. However, bringing back to a conscious level, the basics of assessment may help paint a clearer picture of the role assessment really plays in our classroom. There are many reasons for why we assess students. It opens a door for family communication. It provides accountability for schools. It provides a starting point for instruction as it identifies students' strengths and needs. And of course, the one we hear the most about, and for good reason, it informs our instruction. Once we had established why we assess, we moved our attention to the big picture of how literacy assessment works, and we addressed 3 critical factors related to making sure that data collected is high quality and useful. The data has to yield enough of the right kind of information for us to use the data to make strong inferences about students' literacy development. For this to happen, we have to be sure that the assessments we use are reliable and valid. Reliability refers to data that is accurate and consistent. We can administer it with confidence, knowing that if we gave it a second or third time, the results would provide consistent results. In addition to the assessment having reliability, it must also have validity, meaning that the assessment measures what it was intended to measure. So when an assessment has strong reliability and validity, then we can better ensure that our inferences made from these assessments are what is needed to inform our instruction and improve student achievement. Now we are going to quickly recap some assessment terminology that we revisited in this lesson, working from top to bottom. For this recap, I am generalizing some information in hopes of providing a clearer way of organizing the terms. So be sure to refer to your notes for more precise descriptions. We will start with the 2 main classifications of assessment, quantitative and qualitative. These 2 classifications vary on how the data is collected and interpreted. Quantitative uses numerical data to give us data that can be easily compared, and that tells us how many, how much, and/or how often. Qualitative uses a more narrative format with detailed descriptions to help us better understand why, how, or what happened. Both types of these assessments can be considered as formal and informal assessment, which deals with how the data is obtained. Generally, formal assessments are more standardized, quantitative, rigorous, and administered in a more contrived, unnatural environment. Informal assessments may still use numerical data, but also include a lot of anecdotal, qualitative data collected in a less rigorous manner in a more natural classroom environment. This then leads us to 2 methods of assessment that provide some perspective on how the data is viewed via means of comparison. Norm-referenced assessment views your students' scores from the perspective of how they compare to those of a representative group, while criterion-referenced compares the scores to a body of knowledge, the learning expectations. And finally, the 2 approaches of assessment that classroom teachers are generally the most familiar with and concerned about, formative and summative. Formative assessments tells us what is happening in terms of student learning. It occurs throughout the learning so that instruction can be modified immediately. Summative assessment, on the other hand, tells us what has happened with student learning as it occurs at the end of instruction to show us how much the child learned. It can still be used to inform instruction, but after the fact, which sometimes then occurs in a more intervention format. Think about the 3 big concepts of assessment that were reviewed in this Stop and Jot: the big picture of assessment, how literacy assessment works, and classifications of assessment. How do you utilize these currently in your classroom? Can you identify areas of improvement?